A very good evening guys to all of you. Now we start the third subject of your TYBAF fifth sem, that is cost accounting. ठीक है? Cost accounting 3. Why 3? FYBAF sem 1 में you had cost accounting 1. SYBAF में in sem 3 you had cost accounting 2, and now we have cost accounting number 3. Cost accounting you have in sem 5 as well as in the next semester. Okay? Now listen. First, let me brief you. All of you all have the textbook in front of you mostly. In your costing, you have total 6 chapters. Out of that 6, 5 are pure practical, and 1 is practical cum theory. When I say pure practical, matlab 15 marks ka theory question to has to come from all the chapters. Matlab all the chapters has that little bit of theory, but there's one chapter which you see. Uniform costing and interfirm comparison, that is theory cum practical. A very simple and scoring chapter. Uska theory is also very simple and uska sums are also small sum. It takes 2 hours to do sums of interfirm comparison and uniform costing, and theory there are just 4 to 5 sides to study, so it becomes a very scoring chapter for you all. So total 5 practical chapters and 1 theory cum practical. As I mentioned, all the 5 practical chapters have theory ka base which can be asked as a 15 mark question. You all know that you all get 7-8 mark ka 2 questions or 15 marks ka short notes. Okay? Now let's get into the costing. The first chapter as per index, integrated system of accounting. The first 2 chapters are interrelated. First is integrated, next is non-integrated. To make both the chapters simpler, it is always advisable to start integrated first. There are few colleges who might do non-integrated. I never prefer that. The reason being, if you know integrated now, automatically 60% of the next chapter gets done. If you do integrated properly, automatically 60% of the next chapter gets done. Okay? Now listen. First, what is the meaning integrated system of accounting? See, S5 if you all remember, there was a chapter reconciliation between cost and financial accounts. There was a chapter reconciliation between cost and financial accounts. उसमें क्या होता था? There used to be a separate cost accounting system and there used to be a separate financial accounting system. See, it depends upon what is your scale of operations. If you are operating at a very large scale of production and you have a big company, then companies have a separate costing department and a separate financial department. That is called as non-integrated. What you will have done last year, costing everything was non-integrated. Now see, integrated means combination of financial accounting and cost accounting. The company is operating either at a small scale or at a medium scale, and it cannot afford to have a separate cost accounting department. So when they maintain their accounts is combination of cost accounting and financial accounting. That is called as integrated system. Very important for objective. I'll repeat again. Integrated system of accounting means it is a combination of separate cost account. It's a combination of cost accounting and financial accounting. Non-integrated means separate costing, separate finance. Separate finance, so you all have been studying right from FIGC, SYGC में जो किया था, that was separate finance. And in all the subjects, all the years, FY both the SEMs, SY both the SEMs, and even TY, you all have done FA, that was separate financial. So यहाँ पे the first chapter is integrated, means combination of financial accounting and cost accounting system, and the next chapter will be non-integrated, which is only cost accounting system. Okay? This chapter as well as the next chapter, both purely based on journal entries. This chapter and the next chapter both purely based on journal entries. Now listen, journal entries are very simple, but uske pehle you should understand the concepts. You should understand the concept of manufacturing process, how it takes place. Very basic that I've done earlier. Those who are with me last year in SY, while doing cost sheet, I had explained it. Okay? Now see, this comes into picture only when you have a factory. Because अगर factory रहेगा तो ही manufacturing process होगा ना. you are a manufacturer, you want to manufacture goods, you cannot manufacture without a factory. Now, when you manufacture goods, क्या क्या activities होता है? What all activities takes place? First, what happens? You buy raw materials. Okay? First, what happens? You buy raw materials. Correct? Then, what happens? Raw materials you further process. Raw materials you further process. Workers work on that. Okay? Workers work on that. Raw materials get converted into work in progress. F5 में याद है, you all have done manufacturing final accounts. 3 types of stocks: raw material, WIP, finished goods. Even in last year S5 में working capital में you all have done 3 types of stock: raw material, WIP, finished goods. Raw materials means कच्चा माल. WIP means semi-finished goods, goods which are partially produced, and that gets finally converted into finished goods. Finished goods is the final product. Finished goods is the final product which is ultimately sold to the customer. Finished goods is the final product which is ultimately sold to the customer. So when you have your manufacturing process, there are 3 types of stocks: raw material, WIP, and finished goods. Now this is basic, you all know. Now understand this, because when I pass the entries, your entries will be based on that. Okay? Now see, when I buy raw material now, directly raw material factory में नहीं आ जाता है. When you buy raw material, directly raw material doesn't come in the factory. There is a department which purely looks after movement of raw materials. There is a department which purely looks after movement of raw materials. जैसे कि buying the raw material, after buying it, sending it to the department where the goods are produced. Then, in case there are any defective raw materials, give it back to the supplier, coordinate with the supplier, see what production department wants. According to that, place the order with the vendors, decide material कहाँ से लेना है, क्या rate में लेना है. So there is a specific department who looks after all these raw material का transaction, and that department is called as stores department. That department is called as stores department. So stores is the department where your raw material ka transactions and raw material ka movement takes place. Store is the department where your raw material ka transaction and raw material ka movement takes place. Buying of raw material, supplying it to the production department. Production department is a place where the goods are produced. I am coming to that. Okay? Deciding the rate of purchase, as I mentioned. So all things connected with raw materials, everything is handled by the stores department. Now what will happen? From stores, this is your production department. This is your production department. All manufacturing ka process takes place here. The goods are being manufactured here. Goods are being manufactured here. So what will happen? Production department knows what is to be produced and when it is to be produced. So they will intimate the store department, हम लोग को ये टाइम पे मटेरियल चाहिए. Accordingly, stores will buy from the supplier, that is the creditor. So when the raw material comes, understand this because everything is important while framing the entries. When the raw material comes, it will come first in the stores department. When the raw material comes, it will come first in the stores department. Store department will then send the raw material to production department. Store department will then send the raw material to production department. Production department will produce goods. Now what happens when you produce goods? You just can't produce like that, na? you need workers work there, so you need help of workers. Then there are expenses incurred, factory में production में machinery use होता है, so there are factory expenses like depreciation, factory supervisor को salary pay करना पड़ता है, wages to workers and all that is done. So all that takes place in production department. I give you wages, then you have factory expenses, depreciation on factory assets, all other factory expenses. All that is done and your goods are produced. Okay? Now see, say for example the year ends or the period ends, there will be some part of goods which are yet to be produced. We know na, you will have your production process throughout the year, but accounting में break तो मारना पड़ेगा. Basic of FIGC, accounts are always prepared for 1 year. Say for example my last day of the year is 31st March 20. So क्या होगा? On 31st March 20, you have to see what is the situation of stock. Not only WIP and finished goods, you have to see all the three stock, that is raw material, WIP and finished goods. So if there is something remaining, that becomes a part of my work in progress. We know very well what is work in progress. It is semi-finished goods, goods which are partly produced. It can be 1% complete, 10%, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 95, 98, 99, but not 100. Because if it is 100, it becomes finished goods. So, factory mein processing takes place and you have to incur expenses like wages, factory expenses, factory supervisor's salary, depreciation on factory assets, or any type of factory expenses. Processing is done and then the goods are produced, that is finished goods. The goods are produced, that is finished goods, and after the finished goods are produced, they are sent to the warehouse. After the finished goods are produced, they are sent to the warehouse. Warehouse is the place where the finished goods are stored. Warehouse is the place where finished goods are stored. So factory से निकल के finished goods comes in the warehouse and warehouse से it is sent to the customer premises. Factory से निकल के the finished goods are stored in warehouse and warehouse से they are sold to the customer. So this is the way things go on. पहले raw material is purchased by stores department. Stores department will send the material to the production department. Production department is a place where the goods are produced. All processing activities takes place in production department. If at the end of the day there is some goods which are unproduced but are not fully manufactured or semi-finished, we call it as WIP. So there will be a stock of WIP. And though the goods which are fully manufactured, they become finished goods which will be sold to the customer. From the factory it goes to warehouse and from warehouse it will be sold to the customer. Okay? Now, apart from that, there will be administrative office also who will take care of all the administrative work. So in addition to factory, you will also be having offices. Now since this is integrated, we are supposed to record each and every transaction because it's a combination of financial accounting and cost accounting. When it is integrated, some transactions are to be ignored. Non-integrated. But integrated means you have to consider everything. Okay? Now I have sent pictures of 3 sums. I'll do the first sum. Second sum is exactly same of first. I'll send you uska picture and then I will solve the third sum. First sum mein, I have not kept any transaction relating to administrative office. So listen one thing, understand this explanation. Material is bought by the store department. Store will send it to the production. Production department will incur various expenses. They will produce the goods, they will create WIP, they will create finished goods and send it to the warehouse, and warehouse it will be sold to the customer. And then I'll just show you just example. This is my office. my office will take care of all administrative works. We know that you all have done SOM also. Overheads, operating expense, admin, selling and distribution and finance. Costing में finance नहीं आता है. But office, all administrative expenses incurred in the office are to be treated as office. Office salary, office rent, auditors fees, lawyers charges, depreciation on office assets, all these are expenses which are incurred in office. Okay? First, this is a pure basic thing on the basis of which you have to understand the concept of processing, and on that basis there will be entries. Now when I am explaining the entries, understand very logically. I am telling you it is a very simple chapter provided you do it logically. ये chapter आ गया ना, समझो 70% of the next chapter is also done. If you know this chapter, say 70% of the next chapter is also done. Okay? Now, I have explained the concept. I am taking the first sum, okay? For which I have to prepare a journal. I'll just draw the format and come back into. I'll just pause the video and I'll come back in 2 minutes. Okay guys, now see, I've sent a picture on the group. I have prepared my own basic small sums to make your concepts clear. In the first question, there are 8 transactions. The same transaction there in the second question. That you all try on your own. I will send a solution on the group. Okay? Now, let's take one by one. First, raw materials purchased on credit 1 lakh. Raw material purchased on credit 1 lakh. Now listen, what I told you while explaining the concept. When you buy the material, where it goes? Stores department. So when material is purchased, store department receives it. Now store department will not have one material, they will have different types of materials. So they will have stock of, say for example, they have 100 materials, they will have stock of 100 materials separately. But when an entry is passed, you don't pass separate entry for each material. What happens? All the purchases go in the store department. So in this chapter and even in the next chapter, there is something called as control account which is to be created. Control means all different types of material coming in one, all different types of wages and salaries coming in one, all different types of factory expenses coming in one. That is the concept of control account. So for raw material, the word used is store ledger control account. Matlab all types of material maintained by the stores come in store ledger control account. So when you buy materials, the entry will be material comes in. So material is going in the stores. So therefore you will debit an account called as store ledger control account. So my first entry will be store ledger control account debit 1 lakh. Whenever you purchase material, remember, whenever you purchase material in this chapter and the next chapter, you will debit store ledger. Now what to credit? If payment is made, we credit cash bank. Have they mentioned anything? Yes. They have told you, you have purchased on credit. You have purchased on credit. That means you have purchased from supplier. Payment baki hai. Therefore, we will credit supplier. That is nothing but basic FIGC का entry to creditors. What we do in FIGC? Purchase debit to creditors. So यहाँ पे आएगा purchase की जगह stores because different types of material are purchased and you are not making the payment. It is a credit purchase. Creditor को पैसा देना बाकी है. Therefore, you will credit sundry creditors. So my entry becomes store ledger control account debit 1 lakh to sundry creditors 1 lakh. Being raw materials purchased. I'll repeat again. अगर cash होता, you would have written stores to cash. Check होता, stores to bank. Had they just told you paid, you would have written cash bank. But it is credit, so you will credit sundry creditors. Clear? Next. Raw materials transfer to production, 80,000. Why we buy raw materials? We buy raw materials so we can produce goods. Where the goods are produced? In the factory. Now listen. In the starting I explained you the concept. Store department से goods कहाँ जाता है, material कहाँ जाता है? Production department. Now anything which goes in the production department, let it be transfer of material, let it be incurring of wages, मतलब charging of wages or factory overheads, all type of processing which is done in production department, we use the account work in progress control. In this chapter, most of the accounts may end with the word control will come. Control means what? It is combination of all. जैसे कि I told you, store ledger control account, it consists of all different types of raw materials. Same way, production department में various activities takes place, incurring of wages, incurring of factory expenses, processing of goods, wastage coming in, different types of activities. So all types of activities are placed in an account called as work in progress control account. Okay, so when it comes to anything related to production, transferring of material, wages, factory being overheads, material being processed, think of work in progress control. Now listen, when I receive the material, I debited stores. Understand this concept. यार समझ में आएगा. When I receive material, I debited stores. Now what is happening? Stores से material बाहर जा रहा है. When it came in stores, I debited stores. Now it is going out of stores, so I will credit stores. Where it is going? It is going in the production department. So what I told you, anything which is being incurred in the production department for related to production, you will create WIP. So listen, stores goes out, so I will credit store ledger. So to store ledger control account, that is 80,000, and this goes in the factory for processing, goes in the production department, so we will debit an account called as work in progress. So the account which you will debit will be work in progress control account. Okay? Anything which is sent to the material, let it be material or any type of expenses being processed there, you will debit work in progress. So I repeat, when I get stores, material comes in, so I debit store ledger in the first entry. Now material is going out, so I credit stores, and it is going in the factory for production. Production means WIP, therefore I will debit WIP. Narration being raw materials transferred to production. Being raw materials transferred to production. Getting it now? Understand the first two entries. Purchasing raw materials and then raw materials being transferred to production department. Next, wages paid. First, you will have to pay wages. Now again the same thing. When I pay wages to the workers. There will be different types of workers, skilled workers, unskilled workers, semi-skilled workers, different type of categories of workers having different skills. Final accounts may we have everything put in wages account. Same way यहाँ पे everything will put in wages, but it will be different grades of workers, which as far as accounting is concerned we are not bothered. So whatever are the wages paid, again the same thing, we will put the expenses in an account which is called as wage control account. So what you will do is, you will debit wage control account by 50,000. Wage control means all types of wages which are paid to different workers come in one account, therefore the word control account is used. Okay? All different types of payments made comes in account, therefore we use the word wage control. And payment is being made, so we credit cash bank. So wage control debit 50,000 to cash bank 50,000. Okay? Narration being wages paid. Getting it? I repeat. Because you have paid, you will credit cash bank, and you have paid wages, which is paid to different categories of workers. Even if it is paid to one category, everything goes in wage control. Because if the company has different types of wage account, पूरा जिंदगी accounts बनाने में जाएगा. So as far as accounting is concerned, everything is put in wage control. In the company ka records, they have everything maintained in detail. But when it comes to accounting, everything will go in wage control. So when you incur wages, wage control debit to cash bank. If they say it is outstanding, not paid, so wage control to outstanding wages. Okay? Now see, the question I have framed in such a way that every two entries are connected. जैसे कि first two are connected, same way third and fourth are connected. See what is the fourth one? What it says? Wages charged to production. See यहाँ पे मैंने pay किया, so पहले तो मुझे pay करना पड़ेगा. Now I am not a fool. Why am I paying wages to workers? Because the workers are working in the factory. What are they doing in the factory? They are producing goods. What are they doing in the factory? They are producing goods. What I told you, when there is production of goods, which account to remember? WIP. So when anything is to be incurred in the factory, WIP comes into picture. So now see what will happen. When I paid wages, I debited wage control. Now I will charge it to production, because ultimately it's a factory expense. So what I do, at the time of incurring I debited, now I will credit. So to wage control account, that is 50,000, and it is being charged to the production 45. Ultimately it is a production expense, and because it is a production expense, I will debit work in progress. So my entry becomes work in progress control debit 45,000 to wage control. I will repeat again, being wages charge to production. Okay? Being wages charged to production. I repeat, when you incur, it is wage control to cash bank, because it's an expense covering different types of wages. So I put it in wage control. Ultimately, it is paid for what purpose? For workers doing their hard work to manufacture goods. Manufacture goods means production of goods. So ultimately, production means work in progress. So remember, all different types of expenses incurred in the production department, WIP has to come into picture. Understand the concept starting by explaining the logic of each and every entry, and then we will go fast as and when we proceed towards the chapter. Okay, so now see, third and fourth were connected. Now same way fifth and sixth are interconnected. Let's see. Fifth one. Factory overheads incurred 30,000. Factory overheads incurred 30,000. Again the same thing. Overhead means expenses. Now when I say factory overheads, there are different types of overheads. So we are not bothered. So what we'll do? Same thing. All factory overheads we will put it in one. So that becomes factory overhead control. So it is a factory expense. Because it is a factory expense, I will debit factory overhead control account, and incurred means it is paid. So I will credit cash bank. Kitna amount hai? 30,000. So my entry becomes factory overhead control account debit 30,000 to cash bank account 30,000. Factory overhead control account debit 30,000 to cash bank 30,000. I repeat, it is a factory expense. There are various type of factory expenses. So all you debit to factory overhead control. So factory overhead control to cash bank being factory overheads incurred. Okay, being factory overheads incurred. Getting it now? When I incur wages, wage control to cash bank. When I incur factory overheads, factory overhead control to cash bank. Same concept of wages now. See the next transaction. Factory overheads charged to production. You are not a fool to incur factory expense now. There is some reason now. Why you are incurring factory expenses? Because you are manufacturing goods. Why are having factory? So that there is a place to manufacture goods. So manufacture means production, and what I told you, anything related to production, again WIP. So see the logic. When I incur wages, I debit wage control. When I charge wage, I credit wage control and debit WIP. Same thing I will do here. When I incur factory overheads, I debited factory overhead control. Now I will charge it, so I will reverse it. So to factory overhead control account, that is 25,000, and this is for production purpose. So I will debit work in progress. So my entry becomes work in progress control account debit to 25,000 to factory overheads, being factory overheads charged to production, being factory overheads charged to production. Okay, I'll repeat. See, when I incurred factory overhead to cash bank, why I am incurring factory overheads? I am incurring factory overheads for production, for producing the goods. Production takes place in the production department, and anything connected with production department, as I mentioned, it will be work in progress. Okay? So while incurring, I debit factory overhead control. When I charge it, I will credit it and I will put it in WIP. So part of the factory overheads which has already been incurred is being charged to your production department. Clear with this? Okay. Next, finished goods produced. Now understand this. Finished goods produced. Where will your finished goods get produced? Your finished goods gets produced in the factory. Understand this logic. Finished goods gets produced in the factory. All this is happening in the factory now. You send material to the factory, WIP. You incurred wages, then charged to factory, WIP. You incurred factory overheads, charged to production of factory, WIP. So everywhere WIP was there. Now you just can't keep debiting WIP. What is WIP? Goods being processed. Ultimately, why are we doing business? To make profits. How we will make profits? By selling goods. How we will sell goods? If we produce goods. From where we will get the goods? From the factory. So, raw material, understand this. Raw material, wages, factory overheads. Raw material, wages, factory overheads, all are connected with production. All go to WIP, and ultimately WIP में से ही finished goods बनता है. So raw material, wages, factory overheads gets converted into WIP, and then WIP becomes finished goods. Now what is the production of finished goods? Given 120. So see, WIP को whenever I charged anything to the factory, I debited WIP. Work in progress. Work in progress means the production is on. Work in progress, काम चालू है, production is on. Now what is there? This is converted into finished goods. So what will happen? Finished goods are created. So I will debit finished goods control account, and it gets created from WIP. Therefore, I will credit work in progress control. So therefore, my entry becomes C. I am creating finished goods. Again, finished goods will be of different type. So what I will do is, I will debit finished goods control account debit, and it comes from WIP, so I will debit work in progress. You call it as work in progress, you call it as work in progress. कितना है? 1,20,000. So finished goods control debit 1,20,000 to work in progress 1,20,000. ठीक है? Narration being finished goods produced. Narration being finished goods produced. So see, raw materials bought, transferred to WIP. Wages incurred, transferred to WIP. Factory overheads incurred, transferred to WIP. Everything is transferred to WIP. Now WIP has to go to finished goods. Processing हो रहा है क्या? Lifetime थोड़ी processing होते रहेगा. So now that WIP which is being processed, work in progress, is now fully completed and it will be converted into finished goods. So I create finished goods control account and it comes out of WIP, so I credit WIP. So at the time of incurring, I debited WIP. Now the goods are finished, converted into finished goods, I credit WIP. So finished goods produced entry becomes finished goods control to WIP. Why finished goods control? Because finished goods are created. And why WIP? Because work in progress which was on, the processing was on, is now over to the extent of 120. So I will credit 120. So to the extent of 120, WIP is out and it gets converted into finished goods. So now finished goods are created, and now since finished goods are created, next transaction may I will sell it. See the 8th one. Cost of finished goods sold 1 lakh. Cost of finished goods sold 1 lakh. Now listen, there are two things. One is sales in terms of rupees, which is not there in this sum, so I am not getting into it. So see the word cost of finished goods sold. Now this is very simple. When I created finished goods, I debited finished goods. Now I will sell the finished goods to the customer. These finished goods will go to the customer. So when finished goods were created, I debited. Now finished goods will go out to the customer, so I will credit. So it will be to finished goods control account. कितना है? 1 lakh. So I credit finished goods control by 1 lakh. And this is my cost of selling the finished goods. This is my cost of finished goods, not the selling price at which I have sold to the customer, because that becomes debtors and sales. So this is my cost of selling the finished goods. Finished goods go out, so I credit finished goods, and this is my cost of selling. So I debit an account called as cost of sales. So my entry becomes cost of sales debit 1 lakh to finished goods control 1 lakh. I'll repeat. When I created finished goods, when I produced finished goods, I debited finished goods control. Now the finished goods are sold, so I credit finished goods control, and this is the cost of selling my finished goods, so I debit cost of sales. So my entry becomes cost of sales to finished goods control. Narration being cost of finished goods sold. Narration being cost of finished goods sold. Getting it? So raw materials purchase, transfer to production, incur wages, transfer to production, incur factory overheads, transfer to production, finished goods produce, and then sell it. This was the basic sequence, and all these entries will almost be repeated in each and every sum. Understand this sum carefully, logically, the explanation what I give you, because this is the base not only for this chapter as well as the next chapter. It's very simple. ध्यान से सुनना explanation, and all these 8 entries को perfect दिमाग में बिठा देना with logic. Don't please mug up. Don't mug up, please. I'm telling you. समझ में नहीं आएगा. First, both the chapters are with journal entries and both are interconnected. ये chapter बराबर आ गया ना, 65 to 75% of the next chapter is also done. So the first two chapters, integrated, non-integrated, both are interconnected. Okay, keep that in mind. Clear with this? Okay, so this was the first sum. Second sum जो मैंने दिया है same है. I'm sending the picture. पहले इसको बराबर solve करो, then do that. And in the next video, I am coming out with that third sum. ठीक है? मैंने तीन sum डाले. ये first है, second you all will solve, and the third sum I am doing it in the next video. ठीक है? So I'll be back in some time in the next video.